the barbarism of the Trump administration, its depravity, its lawlessness is on display in federal courthouses all around America every day, multiple times a day, dozens of times a day, hundreds of times a month, 1,000 times already since the Trump administration took office. And by and large, we're winning. The rule of law is winning. The Constitution is prevailing. Sure, there's new reporting about 100 or so former federal judges that in their retirement are calling out the alarm about the attack on the rule of law. Good for you. I appreciate your service. But I like my federal judges not retired. I like my federal judges clinging to their offices, even through senior status, to stay in position to oppose now the Trump administration. Now is not the time for faint-heartedness. Now is not the time for retirement. Now is the time to fight. Now is the time to stay. Now is the time to rule. We've got a couple of hundred judges already who have fought back against Donald Trump's depraved immigration policy, which will even get worse after the tragedy that happened in D.C. People are disappearing from the streets of America without due process. And one of the leading groups that together operate the largest law firm in America and the largest law firm in America dedicated to the rule of law are the 23 state attorneys general who have bound together to fight, and they're winning. And I had the distinct pleasure on behalf of the Legal AF community to get a briefing from them for you, to be a fly on the wall about their every other day meetings and their strategy and their tactics and how they're doing legal jujitsu to flip the Department of Justice on its head and to fight back using what they know. I mean, we're learning that you're getting the same tired, out of energy Department of Justice attorney showing up at every case, and they're going up against a rejuvenated, energized Attorney General's office. Now, I interviewed 11 of them, not at the same time. I had 2 panels, and then I did some one-on-one interviews. But in this last panel that you need to hear from, Delaware Attorney General Kathy Jennings, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, New Jersey Attorney General Matt Platkin, Washington Attorney General Nick Brown. Some of them had been in office during the first Trump administration. Some came in recently. They've all rolled up their shirt sleeves, joined hands along with their departments to fight for you. And I want you to hear from them in this once-in-a-lifetime briefing from the Democratic Attorneys General. And here's the interview. I'd like to welcome to the stage on my left, starting here, Delaware Attorney General Kathy Jennings, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, New Jersey Attorney General Matt Platkin, Washington Attorney General Nick Brown, and Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Kaul. Welcome to Legal AF. So let's kick it off. You all got to your jobs in different ways at different times, but now you're here. You're here in November of 2025. We've got a Trump administration in full swing. You've got 40 or 50 court cases that in one way or another, in some combination, the Democratic attorneys general have joined in on. Talk to our audience and to each other about how do you see your role here when you have a lawless Trump administration and a corrupt Department of Justice on the other end?
I would say that we are speaking with one voice and have been since he took office for the second time in defending people's rights. I think of us as this very effective resistance to the erosion of the rule of law, to taking away people's rights, taking away funding for people who need funding in our states. For example, taking away Head Start. Who takes away a Head Start program? Who takes away SNAP benefits for people who can't find food to eat, don't have the money to feed their families? This president does. And if we aren't fighting to save people from these funding cuts, to save the rights we have in our country, who else will do it? And so we come to work every day and we talk several times a week. with a sense of purpose. And we are strong because we're winning on most of these fights. They are the right fights to have. And anytime he chooses to harm the people in our states, we're going to be there and we're going to hold him to account.
A.G. Brown?
Well, I'm the newest of the group here. We were saying earlier, I've been AG for 11 months, but it feels like years now.
It's an AG years.
Given the scars that we have. You know, on the one hand, I don't think the job has changed. I mean, all of us have a obligation, an oath that we took when we took office to defend our respective state constitutions, to defend the United States Constitution, and to protect the people in our states. What has changed in this year is the bad actor is the President of the United States and his administration. And the abuses and harms that we're facing is now coming from the federal government and all the significance and power that that comes with that. And so now we have to respond to a different type of challenge. And I grew up professionally in the Department of Justice, and now we're going to the court to push back against a Department of Justice that has abandoned so many of their core principles and values. And so the challenge is different, but the core responsibility has not changed. The way we approach it has changed. We're working in concert, you know, on a daily basis. Our staffs are talking so regularly, but the challenge is uniquely different than it was in the first Trump term.
A.G. Call?
I think, as my colleagues have talked about, I think we all view a fundamental part of our job as protecting the people of our state, probably our most important responsibility. And how we do that depends on the circumstances we're confronted with. And in this administration, a lot of it has meant standing up against what the federal government has been doing. One thing I love about my AG colleagues is every single one of them is more than happy to stand up for what they think is right and to push back and to fight for the interests of their states. And we've done that in literally dozens of cases now. And it's not just about policy. The policy implications are huge and they're critical. And as A.G. Jennings talked about, they impact critical issues like Head Start and SNAP. But it's also now about the fundamental principles of our democracy. You know, are we standing by the rule of law, or are we going to let Donald Trump succeed in making this a country where our justice system is weaponized to advance a political agenda rather than justice? Are we going to stand by First Amendment principles? Are we going to stand by the principle that Congress gets to decide how spending is allocated and not the president? And we've got an administration right now that does not care about those fundamental values. We've been fighting back time and time again. And the good news is we have been successful time and time again.
Yeah. A.G. Plotkin?
Yeah, I think what's been said, I completely agree with. I don't think we've changed our stripes at all in a lot of ways. We do this work every single day. We protect our residents from harm. We prosecute bad guys. We go after people who are scamming you. Like Nick said, the difference is it's the federal government. I never thought I'd have to sue the federal government not to distribute 12,000 machine guns into our communities. That was a real lawsuit that we filed. Only those of us on stage and our Democratic colleagues joined that suit. It shocked me that there weren't 50 states saying don't put machine guns on the street at a time when we're trying to keep people safe. You know, it shocks me that at a time when we're trying to, all of us work every day to lower costs for our residents. You have a federal government that we've had to sue to keep them from unlawfully providing people's health care, education assistance, food assistance. Those are real suits we've had to file that we've won. And again, it's 23 states. It should be 50. It shocks me that at a time when we're taking on human trafficking, you have people in Washington apparently covering up for human traffickers.
Washington, D.C., not Washington State.
Correct. And so, yeah, so nothing, I don't think anything's changed with us. What shocks me is how few others out there are fulfilling their obligations, institutions that have capitulated, Congress, some universities, members of our legal profession, which we've talked about. That's what shocks me. Not that the brave people on this stage have the courage to stand up for their residents, because I've seen them do that for years.
Yeah. A.J. Rowe?
I think Matt just hit it on the nail. I think what has changed, Kathy, Josh, and I came in halfway through the first Trump administration, and there was a Congress that at some points would push back and fight for what the Constitution has said is their responsibility. There were people even in the administration that pushed back, whether it was the Attorney General or people within the different agencies, White House counsel, right, so forth. Now they're just loyalists. They're people who are afraid, who are hired specifically because they're going to be loyalists. They're Congress is. We've got a president who was asked on national TV whether he has to follow the Constitution, and he says, "I'm not a lawyer. I don't know whether I have to follow the Constitution." And we have a Congress that has just abdicated its responsibility and said, and has allowed a president to not treat them as a co-equal branch of government. And so the American public is calling out for somebody to fight, and it's our family of attorneys general who are uniquely positioned to put up that fight, and not in a performative way, but in a real way where we have standing to fight on behalf of the citizens of our state, but quite frankly, we're also fighting for the citizens of states that are represented by state AGs who are not stepping up to the task.
Yeah, where are the 27, and why are they uniformly not? No one's crossing that picket line. I mean, no.
Well, one thing I want to say about that I think is so important, and this has really come up in the last few years. In a lot of our cases, if you're not one of the states that's part of that suit, your residents don't get protection. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court has increasingly made it clear that the relief can only go to the parties involved. That was part of what the birthright citizenship case was focused on, was that kind of issue. And that means that in our states where there are Republican AGs, or at least where the Democratic governor in a few states has not been able to join, they're left without protection. So if they are having healthcare funding cuts, their researchers are losing the research that they're doing. If they've got cuts to programs, they're losing it. We want to help everybody. And so we've had some cases where our success has been everybody's success, like our effort to fight against the cuts to SNAP. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of cases, the relief has applied where folks have had a Democratic AG, but not where they had a Republican AG.
Have you been surprised as a group, just to follow up on that, are you surprised that since the nationwide injunction being questioned as a tool by the Supreme Court, that you haven't seen any Republican attorneys general reach out to you?
I wish I were surprised, but I think it's abject fear. If he has appointed sycophants in his cabinet and to head the office of the Attorney General, and he has people who cannot and will not say no to him and will not stand up to him, state AGs are doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. No one is willing to defend our Constitution except us.
Yeah. We had a federal judge today question whether a U.S. attorney was a puppet or not for Donald Trump and Lindsay Halligan.
Maybe a U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
Not sure she's properly so.
Oh, yeah. Well, purported. I think that's how or the indictment signer, I think is how some judges refer to her.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that, and I think Kathy hit it on now, the politics of self-preservation has led to a place where, as Josh pointed out, the citizens in these red states, or these states represented by Republican attorneys general, are not being advocated for. And, you know, I think I can speak for each and every one of us. We don't want to be AG just to call ourselves AG and just to be reelected and call ourselves AG. We want to serve in these positions to advocate for the people who have elected us to this office.
Yeah. Yeah, we really have to be fighters. And I've always liked a good fight. And my friends here sitting with me today have always liked a good fight. And now we get to do it in a very real and meaningful way. You know, my career has been in the courtroom fighting for justice. And now I'm doing the same thing, but we're doing it in a much broader and I think important way, because you have to meet the moment. And the moment we are in right now, I've never seen before. We have a president who simply doesn't think the law applies to him, nor does he believe in separation of powers. He believes in absolute power. Somebody needs to stand up to this guy and say no. The courts have been hugely helpful. I think that the courts have told him time and time again that if Congress passes a law and appropriates the funds, guess what? You don't get to choose whether those funds get stopped or continue to flow. That is not your job as a president.
But are they being backed by the Supreme Court?
We'll find out.
Ultimately.
And
But we should be. We should be backed by the Supreme Court because these are basic principles. Just like when he did away with birthright citizenship on day one, we sued him on day two because he obviously didn't read the 14th Amendment. And that should be crystal clear.
First ruling was Seattle, Washington with Judge Coffiner, right, in birthright citizenship.
Judge Kunauer, yeah,
Oh,
a
Kunauer.
Reagan appointee.
I wish I knew how to pronounce the name.
It's okay. Yeah, he was a Reagan appointee, and I went to that first court hearing, and he said this is the most blatantly unconstitutional action that he'd ever seen in his 38 some years on the bench. And we will find out, I think, in just a few days whether that case is going to be back at the Supreme Court. I think most of us anticipate that we will. I think we'll prevail on that case. But to your sort of implication. The Supreme Court is increasingly giving Donald Trump more power, more executive authority, particularly on issues of national security or immigration enforcement. The vast majority of our cases, however, are never going to go to the Supreme Court, which is why it's so important that we file these cases in our states.
Well, that's a very good point for our audience because the 99.9% of justice is done at a level below the United States Supreme Court, district court level or first level of appeal, right?
Also, they've capitulated after we sued them. So, by the way, I think that the judge has a few more blatantly unconstitutional things to put on his list since January. We sued them for $6 billion of education funding that they didn't pay in June. 4:45 p.m., the day before the money was supposed to come, we got a notice saying, if you have a kid with autism in New Jersey, we're not going to fund those services. Insane. Yeah. We sued them. That case never went to a decision by a judge, never got a decision. They just caved because they realized, oh, wow, somebody's actually pushing back. The machine gun case I talked about, they caved. 12,000 machine guns are not on our streets. Machine guns capable of firing 900 rounds per minute. That's what the federal government was trying to distribute. And just to answer your earlier question, look, this isn't always popular. I sued the Biden administration. I've sued prominent Democrats in New Jersey. I think we've all taken on tough institutional fights. The idea that you wouldn't, say, join a lawsuit to keep 42 million Americans from starving at the hands of their own government, my state, 850,000 New Jerseyans, 350,000 children. It wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to offend some powerful people in Washington. That would be the easiest lawsuit I would ever have to join. And so I do not understand how you can sit there and say you're fulfilling your oath to the people you serve, to millions of people, if you're going to sit there and be quiet when the federal government is starving them for the first time in our nation's history.
Has anybody proposed having a breakfast with them, having a meeting with them? How do you guys communicate with your Republican
I
counterparts?
talked to some about this.
Yeah.
They hope we're successful.
Yeah.
Right. They wish you well.
Well, that education, the education funding case I thought was really interesting. Like, we all joined the lawsuit, and there was a coalition of Republican AGs that wrote a very strongly worded letter to the administration. But that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Like, you have to hold these people to account by filing cases, explaining your claims, threatening to go to court. And we, on a case so vital to education of American children in every single state, all the best they could do was write a letter to the administration expressing some concerns. It was weak.
And a lot of this gets to a dynamic I think is so important for people to understand. Three of us were here for half of the first Trump administration, or the last 2 years of it. This is a totally different thing we're dealing with right now. It is far more extreme. And at the same time, the checks and balances that had been there in the last administration are failing in a lot of areas. And that's something that people should be concerned about and should be calling on their members of Congress and others to push back on. But it's part of the reason that these cases we're fighting are so important. And the good news, and the thing I hope people are heartened by, is the courts are ruling against this president time after time. We'll see how things shake out at the Supreme Court, as A.G. Jennings said before. But we've got Reagan appointees in, not just Washington, but Massachusetts, Reagan appointees who are calling this administration out. One judge stepped down because he said he can't be constrained by the limits of what he can say as a judge. Yeah. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. These are not left-wing advocates. These are
Trump
Reagan
appointee
appointees.
to strike down the Texas congressional map.
I think it's important to note that there are areas where we do work with our Republican counterparts, and we I can speak for myself. I know most of them fairly well and consider some of them friends, but they're absent here. So it's not our lack of willingness to collaborate. We collaborate on consumer protection issues, antitrust issues, and other issues. It's their lack of willingness to step up and counter the president, because he will turn on those within his own party.
And it'll get worse as his grip on power slips and as he becomes truly lame duck. It won't get better. It'll get worse, the abuse of power.
That's right.
Yeah. Let's talk about voting, because our audience is very concerned about it. They were buoyed by what happened on election night two weeks ago, up and down the ballot in places including Mississippi and Georgia and Pennsylvania and New Jersey, Virginia and Manhattan, New York City. But they're worried about their vote, and they're worried about what they hear about data collection and the Department of Justice suing states to get, core personal information about people who vote. Donald Trump's threats to, he's making good on it, sending in election watchers for the Department of Justice in a couple of states this last election. What's happening and what are you doing in your states to ensure that the right to vote is being protected?
Well, I'll go first. I chair the voter protection working group for the Dem AGs, and we are meeting on a consistent basis with representatives from each of our offices, as well as a number of outside groups to help provide some research and data for us. And so we're trying to share information and strategies now so we can be prepared for the next election. This is a unique issue in some ways because every state has a different voting system, and so the laws are very distinct to our states. But we're making sure that we're ready, that people's rights at the polls are protected, there's not voter intimidation, that we know and have briefs ready to go, and we have to challenge things on election day. But we don't want to wait till, just a couple months before election. We want to start doing that work now. And we're also pushing back on these really crazy, unconstitutional executive orders that the president issued earlier this year in an attempt to try to take control of our very unique voter systems. I live in Washington State. We're 100% vote by mail state, which is the best way to do it for everybody.
It's 100% vote by mail?
100% vote by mail. You can get your ballot. You can vote 2 weeks in advance. It's great. But it's obviously something that the president has been targeting for a very long time. So we're really concerned about efforts there. And then many of our states, if not all, have been subject to these very ridiculous requests for voter information, asking for 10 years of voting data. And that's everybody's personal information. And we've said no, and they've sued some of our colleagues in other places. But we have to take on those fights because voting is the foundation for all the other work that we have to do.
Right. And how about AG Jennings? What's happening in Delaware?
Delaware's pretty safe, and we're going to keep it that way. And so we've had challenges to our voting laws. They have not been successful. And I want people to understand that we will be there. We will be the guardians of the right to vote. I want people to feel safe. I want people to feel confident that their vote matters. And I want people to show up to vote. After all, things will never change unless people exercise that most fundamental, that most important right to vote.
And if last week or so was any measure, it was one of the biggest turnouts around the country. In New York saw numbers they hadn't seen in 30, 40 years. If that's the pent-up demand to vote against this administration, but you're right, they have to. We tell our audience all the time, get the information that you need here on a show like ours. We'll talk truth to each other, get into the streets and protest. But there's no replacement for, as Barack Obama says, don't boo, vote. And if they don't vote, they're not going to like the result on election day at midterm.
Yeah, we just had our election in New Jersey. Record number of people came out to vote, which regardless of what party you're on, that should be something I think we universally celebrate. We've all worked to expand access to the ballot. They made a big deal about sending monitors to the state of New Jersey. I know they did the same in California, and Rob Bontebelt did the same thing.
What did that look like?
2 people. Literally.
See, we're breaking news on Legal AF.
Mail-in, or watching the counting of mail-in ballots, which we already have monitors for.
2 people in the entire state?
Yes, as I understand it, they were watching YouTube. So here's the thing. It's not about what they were actually doing. It has nothing to do with how many people. It was about the press release.
Right,
because
of course.
This president is making a very cynical bet that he can scare people away from exercising their fundamental right, something that people fought and died for. And look, if the results, regardless of where you are in the party, I think the results were very clear a couple weeks ago. If his goal was to keep people from voting through scare tactics, that didn't work. It's not keeping people from protesting. I think this president's acting like an authoritarian dictator. I don't think that's like an extreme thing to say given the way he's behaving. But the only way that takes hold is if people don't care enough to show up. And that bet, I really think he's being proven already quite wrong on.
Well, a battleground for voting and for the takeover of the National Guard and all of that is Illinois. So, AG Raul, what can you tell the people in Illinois about their voting rights?
Well, I had the pleasure of serving in the legislature prior to being elected Attorney General, and having been the sponsor of a constitutional amendment that enshrines voting rights protection into Illinois' Constitution, and now I'm in a position to enforce that, and we've been challenged on our efforts to make sure that every vote that's casted either before or on election day, whether it's at a polling place or through mail, is counted. And we've successfully defended against those challenges. With regards to the National Guard, just days ago we had a supplemental filing at the Supreme Court. I think it's a extremely important case that speaks to whether or not the president can militarize our cities. And the Solicitor General audaciously argues for a deference to the president to determine his own facts as to whether or not the militia, the National Guards of states, one state can be sent into another. And it's a frightening argument to make. I'm assuming the Supreme Court will come down in our way. Otherwise, there's an authority given to the president that's not reviewable by the judiciary for them to militarize our cities.
Yeah, and you had Judge Breyer, one of the first cases about the National Guard. He had a whole list in his case about the posse comitatus, about the future dystopic view. And one of them was a president claiming some sort of voter irregularity uses the National Guard to both interfere with the election and to seize the ballots.
Well, the interesting thing is the district court level of the same cases we're both before the district court as well as before the Supreme Court. Judge Perry, who presided over the district court case, in her order referenced Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 29, where he argued that it would be unimaginable that the militia of one state would be sent into another state, that it was preposterous to even be making the argument that would be a possibility anytime.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 35 years as a federal litigator. I've never seen federal judges have to quote the Federalist Papers or the founding or framers. I mean, it's just amazing what they have to do with this particular presidency. AG Call, tell us what's happening in your state with voting.
Yeah, well, as you may know, we occasionally have close elections in Wisconsin. I was elected by a margin of 0.65 percentage points the first time I won. And not to brag, but I doubled it the second time. It was about 1.33. And what's kind of amazing about Wisconsin is those are not unusual margins. We often have very close elections. And so that means that there are often a lot of contested disputes over the rules of our elections because marginal changes in our laws can impact who wins an election. So we've done a few things, and really this has needed to happen throughout the Trump administration because of the chaos the president has inserted into our election system. We make clear before major elections that if you engage in voter intimidation or voter fraud or any other criminal activity around elections, you need to expect to be held accountable. That is a critical responsibility we have to protect our elections. And then if there are efforts to challenge our laws in a way that would undermine the ability of people to exercise their right to vote, we are going to vigorously defend those laws, and we've had a lot of success in doing that. Before I was AG, I worked on a number of voting rights cases, and I'm really proud of the record we have of protecting people's rights to vote. What I would say is that I think it's critical that people are vigilant about our elections, but I also have a lot of confidence that we will continue having safe elections, not only because of what's going to happen in court, but because of something that was mentioned before. You know, we've talked about the different institutional entities and who stood up. I'll tell you who's been standing up to this administration. It's the people of this country. And when we have elections, people are going to make sure their voices are heard. And that, to me, is ultimately the best defense against any attacks on our system.
I think our audience at Legal AF will sleep better at night knowing that we have the representatives of the people here who are fighting hard as the, pardon me, as the people's attorney in their respective states, but then come together and form probably the largest public interest law firm in the country, right? The 23 law departments that you all represent. And I think that gives our audience a lot of comfort, real honor and pleasure to have you here together, to have our audience be able to listen in on an intimate conversation about things that matter, about the rule of law, about our democracy. And really thank you for being here on Legal AF, each one of you. Welcome back. Because of you, I'm able to do interviews like that. Because of you and our audience, your fervent support, your subscriptions, your memberships, that's how we have street credibility to get attorneys general to get in a room with us and talk to us. I can't tell you how many times, both on air and privately, they said to me, and I took the compliment for you. Thank you for what you do. It's necessary to draw attention to these matters. Now is the time. We need your help and your support, and thank you to Legal AF for shining a light on it. That's all a reflection of our audience. I'm glad you're here. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button, and help us continue to grow our pro-democracy channel. Till my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touches Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.